Have you ever noticed that some of the kindest people you've ever met are also some of the most tired people? The ones who always show up, who always smile, who always say yes when you ask for help. But if you look closely enough, if you really pay attention, you can see the exhaustion in their eyes. You can sense that somewhere behind that kindness is something deeper, something heavier, maybe even something darker. We often imagine kindness as this pure, uncomplicated good. We tell children to be kind. We admire kindness in leaders. We measure our own humanity by how much compassion we can extend. But kindness, like everything else in this complicated world, has a shadow. And when you ignore that shadow, when you pretend it doesn't exist, kindness itself can turn into something destructive. It starts small. A child learns that being kind, being agreeable, earns them love. When they put their own needs aside to make others comfortable, they are rewarded with smiles, praise, maybe even affection they didn't receive otherwise. Over time, this association buries itself deep inside their nervous system. Kindness becomes survival, and the older they get, the harder it becomes to separate who they are from what others expect them to be. They become the reliable one, the good person, the friend who never complains. But here's the truth. When kindness is forced, when it is driven by fear of rejection or a desperate need to be valued, it's no longer pure kindness. It becomes a mask. And masks, when worn too long, start to suffocate the person beneath them. Think about the people in your life who are endlessly kind. They'll listen to your problems for hours. They'll help you move. They'll lend money they don't have. They'll sacrifice their own rest just to make sure you're okay. At first, it feels admirable, even saintly. But if you've ever been that person, if you've lived that role, you know the truth. Behind every act of self-sacrifice is a quiet resentment, a voice that whispers, "What about me?" But that voice is often silenced because kindness, especially chronic kindness, comes with an unspoken rule. You're not allowed to put yourself first. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon. It has a name: compassion fatigue. It describes what happens when someone gives so much of their empathy, so much of their care, that they eventually run dry. Healthcare workers experience it. Teachers experience it. Even parents experience it. But it's not only about professions. Everyday people, those who identify as kind souls, are at risk too. Studies show that people who consistently prioritize others over themselves report higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems compared to those who maintain balance. Kindness, when unchecked, becomes self-erasure, and that's the dark side. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all. It becomes a subtle form of self-destruction. It's like watering every plant in the garden except your own roots. Eventually, the gardener collapses, and the entire garden withers with them. But here's the more unsettling part. Sometimes kindness itself becomes a weapon, not in the obvious way, like someone pretending to be nice to manipulate others, but in the quieter, more unconscious way. When you are known as the kind one, people start to expect it. They rely on it. They shape their behavior around it. And without even realizing it, your kindness teaches others that your needs are secondary, that your feelings are negotiable. Over time, people stop even asking what you want because they assume you'll always adjust to them. The kind person ends up training the world to overlook them. This creates a paradox. The kinder you are, the more invisible you become. And invisibility is not peace. It's loneliness dressed up in politeness. Now, none of this means that kindness is bad. Far from it. Genuine kindness is one of the most beautiful forces in the world. But there's a difference between kindness that flows from abundance and kindness that bleeds from emptiness. One heals, the other corrodes. One comes from love, the other from fear. Let's look at some facts. In a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, researchers found that people who struggle to say no, often those who identify as kind and agreeable, are significantly more likely to experience burnout. Another study out of the University of Berkeley showed that altruistic behavior increases well-being, but only when it is voluntary and authentic. When kindness is performed out of guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing others, it has the opposite effect, actually lowering happiness and increasing stress. And yet, so many of us get trapped in this cycle. We don't want to disappoint anyone, so we keep saying yes. We don't want to be perceived as selfish, so we keep giving. We don't want to lose love, so we keep sacrificing. But the cost of this endless kindness is enormous. Slowly, you begin to lose sight of yourself. You don't even know what you want anymore because your entire identity has been built around serving others. You become a stranger in your own skin. And here's where the monster within comes in. Because when you suppress your needs, when you deny your anger, when you bury your boundaries in the name of kindness, those emotions don't disappear. They collect in the shadows, they ferment, and eventually they come out in ways you can't control. Maybe it's snapping at someone you love for something small. Maybe it's passive-aggressive comments, resentment that leaks out in subtle ways. Or maybe it's even darker, years of repressed feelings exploding all at once, leaving you shocked at the person you've become. We like to imagine that kindness protects us from darkness, but in reality, kindness without honesty creates the perfect breeding ground for it. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you smile when you want to cry, every time you hold back your truth to make someone else comfortable, you are not being kind. You are abandoning yourself, and abandonment always has consequences. Now let's be real. Why do we do this? Why do kind people struggle so much with boundaries? The answer lies in our culture. From a young age, many of us are conditioned to believe that kindness equals worthiness, that being agreeable is safer than being authentic. That love is earned by what we give, not by who we are. Children who grow up in environments where love is conditional, where affection depends on performance, obedience, or self-sacrifice, often carry this belief into adulthood. They become adults who confuse people-pleasing with kindness. But true kindness does not erase the self. True kindness includes the self. If your kindness is costing you your mental health, your joy, your energy, then it's not kindness anymore. It's self-neglect dressed as virtue. So the dark side of kindness is not that kindness itself is bad. It's that kindness can be twisted by fear, by conditioning, by culture, by our own unhealed wounds, into something that looks noble on the surface but slowly eats us alive inside. And when that happens, the very thing we thought was our greatest strength becomes the very thing that breaks us. If you've ever felt this, the exhaustion, the resentment, the sense of being invisible even though everyone calls you so kind, you're not alone. You're not broken. What you're experiencing is the natural consequence of a world that doesn't teach us how to balance giving with protecting ourselves. It's the monster within, not because you're bad, but because unexpressed truths eventually demand to be seen. So how do we embrace kindness without letting it destroy us? How do we stay compassionate without turning into martyrs? How do we love others without abandoning ourselves? The answer lies in one simple but deeply uncomfortable truth. Kindness must begin with you. Not in a selfish disregard for others kind of way, but in the sense that if your kindness doesn't include yourself, then it isn't truly kindness at all. It's performance, and performance eventually collapses. Think of it like this. If you've ever flown on an airplane, you know the safety instructions. Put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. At first, that advice feels wrong. Why not help your loved one first? But the logic is clear. If you pass out from lack of oxygen, you can't help anyone. The same principle applies to kindness. If you neglect your own needs, your own rest, your own well-being, your ability to truly care for others eventually suffocates. This is where boundaries enter the picture. And boundaries for many kind people feel terrifying. They feel like rejection. They feel like selfishness. They feel like shutting people out. But in reality, boundaries are the purest form of honesty. A boundary says, this is what I can give, and this is what I cannot. It says, my love is real, but it cannot exist if I'm empty. It says, I care enough to show you my limits because without them, my care will rot into resentment. Psychologists describe boundaries as the invisible lines that define where you end and another person begins. Without those lines, relationships blur into dependency, manipulation, or silent suffering. With them, relationships become clear, mutual, and grounded in respect. Research shows that people who set healthy boundaries often experience deeper, more meaningful relationships because their kindness comes from choice, not compulsion. And people who respect their own boundaries are actually seen as more trustworthy because when they say yes, you know they mean it. But here's the challenge. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to yourself. And that can feel uncomfortable if you've spent your whole life equating worth with selflessness. You might even lose relationships in the process. Some people won't like it when you stop overextending yourself. Some will push back, accuse you of changing, maybe even withdraw from you. And that's painful. But it's also necessary because relationships built on the expectation of endless giving were never truly balanced in the first place. There's a concept known as pathological altruism. It describes what happens when the desire to help actually causes harm, either to the giver or the receiver. For example, when someone sacrifices their health to care for others, or when constant rescuing prevents others from ever learning independence. Pathological altruism looks like kindness, but it creates dependency, guilt, and exhaustion. It is quite literally kindness gone wrong. This ties into something even bigger, the cultural myth of the good person. Many societies idealize kindness as the highest virtue, but often in a way that subtly encourages self-erasure. Think about how often we hear phrases like, "She's such a good girl, she never causes trouble," or "He's such a nice guy, he always helps everyone." Hidden in those compliments is a dangerous assumption that goodness means never making demands, never saying no, never disrupting the peace. But real goodness is not about erasing yourself. It's about showing up as your full, authentic self and still choosing compassion. When kindness comes from authenticity, it liberates. When it comes from fear, it enslaves. So what can you do to shift from enslaved kindness to liberated kindness? First, practice the pause. When someone asks something of you, don't immediately say yes. Take a breath. Ask, do I have the energy for this? Do I want to do this? Even a few seconds of reflection can save you from automatic people-pleasing. Second, learn the power of gentle no's. A no doesn't have to be harsh. It can be kind. I care about you, but I can't take this on right now. The world won't fall apart if you say no. In fact, honesty makes your yes more meaningful. Third, reframe your worth. Your value isn't determined by how much you give away. You are worthy even when you rest, even when you say no, even when you take nothing on your shoulders. Fourth, tend to your own garden. Fill yourself with what nourishes you. Friendships, creativity, stillness. When you live from abundance, kindness flows naturally. It becomes a gift, not a burden. Fifth, allow yourself to feel the harder emotions. Anger, frustration, sadness. They're not enemies of kindness. They're signals. They tell you when your boundaries are being crossed. Suppress them, and they become the monster within. Acknowledge them, and they guide you toward balance. For many people, kindness has become a lifelong mask. The smile you wear to cover exhaustion. The yes you give to avoid conflict. The generosity you perform to prove your worth. But masks are heavy. The real journey is not to throw away kindness, but to remove the mask and let kindness come from the real you. The you that can say yes and no with equal honesty. If you want to know who you truly are, look at how you treat yourself when no one is watching. That's where authentic kindness begins. Do you rest when you're tired? Do you forgive yourself when you fail? Do you speak to yourself with compassion? If not, then your kindness to others is built on a fragile foundation. The irony is this: when you treat yourself with true kindness, your kindness toward others becomes more powerful, not less. It inspires rather than exhausts. And maybe that's the final lesson. The dark side of kindness isn't about rejecting kindness. It's about transforming it from a mask into a mirror, from compulsion into choice, from survival into love. So the next time someone tells you you're so kind, pause. Ask yourself, is this kindness coming from fear or from freedom? From exhaustion or from abundance? From the mask or from the real me? Because at the end of the day, the monster within kind people isn't their anger or their limits or their boundaries. The real monster is self-neglect. And once you face it, once you set down the mask, you'll discover that your kindness doesn't disappear. It grows stronger, sharper, more radiant. It becomes the kind of kindness that doesn't just keep others alive, but keeps you alive too. And maybe that's the ultimate kindness, to live fully as yourself, without erasing, without performing, without apologizing, to show the world that compassion doesn't mean self-erasure. It means truth. That's the kind of kindness the world needs most. Not endless yeses, not silent suffering, but the courage to love without losing yourself.